Welcome to Negronis with Nord, episode 88. Today we have an incredible guest, Casey Lewis, who writes the absolute must-read newsletter in marketing these days, Afterschool, where she dives into youth culture, trends, what the kids are buying, what they're looking at on social, why you should care about it. We talk about how these trends form, how brands need to react to them, what you need to do to stay relevant, and why you should care about what a bunch of children are looking at on the internet. I learned so much from this conversation, which is not a surprise because I am learning so much from her newsletter every single week. She takes a real research-based, data-driven approach to what she is doing, going so far as to, I think, this holiday season, watching 200 holiday haul videos to understand what kids were asking for and getting for Christmas. There is no person on earth that thinks more about what Gen Z wants, what is driving them, and how brands need to react. I'm really excited for y'all to listen to this. As always, like and subscribe. Give us a review on the pod. If you're enjoying this, let us know suggestions of who you would like to see. Follow us on Instagram at fohr.co. And without further ado, let's get into this week's episode. I feel like you're on podcasts all the time, and we are so excited to have you. But do you get sick of people being like, I'm so excited to have you? You must be hearing that like 5 times a day.
No. Does that ever get old? Of course not.
Everyone else says it, but we really are so excited to have you. Casey Lewis from Afterschool and many other things. You have been in our company's Slack channels, I feel like, for years now. We have this like industry news where everyone shares things, and I feel like, Afterschool is in there at least once or twice a week. So it's such a treat to sit down with you. Thank you for coming.
It's great to be here.
And thank you for agreeing to the 3 p.m. cocktail.
Thank you for treating me.
It's always a little dance. Do you want to have a Negroni at 3 p.m. and kind of like say goodbye to the rest of your day? So I appreciate you doing that.
Taking one for the team.
Thank you. Yes, it's a burden we all must carry, getting a buzz in the afternoon. You write, among so many things, but you are most known for, you write a newsletter on Gen Z. I feel like so many people, I've been listening podcasts with you, they ask like what your interest is, why Gen Z? And I think it's an apt question to start with, like, what is it that had you kind of dedicate your life to studying youth culture? Because it's not just like you're Gen Z obsessed, you've always loved youth culture.
Yes. I appreciate you saying that I'm youth, because that is the thing that comes up a lot, is like, what about Gen Z? And I'm like, it's not about Gen Z. They just happen to be the young ones, although they're increasingly not the young ones, as Gen Alpha
they're aging too,
old.
you old bastards.
But I think from a very young age, I was obsessed with trends without knowing that was what I was interested in. Very, very into teen magazines. And from a young age, from like age 11, when I was like, Mom, can I please get this issue of 17 magazine? And it was always about the back to school issues that were the best, because you really looked at that and you were like, this is what I need to wear for the coming year. Yeah. Those editors, they dictated my choices 100%. And at that point, it was the wealth of teen mags. It was Elle Girl, Cosmo Girl, Teen Vogue, 17, YM, like I got all of them. And so I just was really into like the ebbs and flows of what, I didn't realize that was youth trends, but it was. And then I interned at Teen Vogue one summer. Actually, it was when digital media was sort of just beginning, kind of the rise of Tumblr. I remember you I feel like you were like a Tumblr celebrity at that point.
Oh, thank you. We're cutting that. We're definitely cutting that into a reel. I appreciate being recognized for that. Thank you.
But yeah, I worked at a couple of agencies researching youth trends when I was in college. I didn't realize I was doing marketing. I just thought I was like documenting what young people were doing, which I was, but I didn't really think deeply about like marketers are taking this into account for how they reach young people. That clicked later, but that's the sort of genesis for my youth trend obsession.
If you think back, like what was the first trend that you remember like active participation in, of like you saw something in one of these magazines and you were like, I need that? Because like I do feel like when you're young, you have those moments where like you get a new piece of clothing and it like delegitimizes every other piece of clothing that you have, because like now it's like everything else is like old and shitty. Like, what was the first thing that you were like, that was the first trend I participated in, like with my whole heart?
No one has, I've not thought about this. No one's asked me this, but I think I can point to, it was sort of around the time that Tommy jeans was so big. I just always think of Aaliyah with the like low slung jeans and the like, in my head she's wearing like a tube top. I was 10, so I wasn't wearing a Tommy Hilfiger tube top, but the department store, I'm from a small town in Missouri, and the sort of closest mall to us had a local department store that had an amazing Tommy jeans section.
Amazing.
And one year just before back to school, they got Tommy jeans. I was still kids sizes, so I was still shopping in the kids department, but the Tommy jeans kids sizes. And I got a sweater that was red and navy, and it said Tommy on the front, and it said jeans on the back. And I got matching low-rise like flares that had like Tommy, some sort of Tommy something. And I felt so fucking cool in that Tommy jeans outfit going back to school. And you know what? This is like such a rural Missouri memory, but we would go back to school shopping before Fair Week. Fair Week was the last week of July. And then we would all wear our back to school outfits, debut them at Fair Week in July in Missouri. So we would be sweating
like
sweating through our sweat or our sweaters and our jeans. But when I wore that outfit to the fair, I felt like I was as cool as Aaliyah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was 10.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And what was your, like, I grew up in the South as well. What was that department store? Was it like a Belk or something?
It was called Bergner's.
Okay. See, I don't know that one.
I don't even think it was a chain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just thinking about you wearing, like, you know, basically like Jinkos and a Tommy sweatshirt. One of my first ones, this was like it probably was not my first trend, but like I took Latin in high school, obviously, why not? We went to like on a trip to Rome, and I bought a pair of capri pants. Don't laugh. From Sicily, and these like neoprene Prada sandals from the like this like I made my teacher drive me, only me. There was like plenty of girls on this trip, but I was the only one that wanted to go to the Prada outlet outside of Florence, and like I went to the Prada outlet and I got these neoprene and pleather black sandals, and I'd wear my Prada sandals and my capri pants.
How old were you?
14, 13 or something. And in Georgia, with my like dyed hair, and you could imagine what wearing capri pants to a Christian school in Georgia and the like 90s did for my social life. But it is such an interesting time, because I think kids are obviously like, you know, you're trying to find yourself.
Exactly.
You're trying to fit, like in the same time you're trying to like be different from everyone. You're trying to be this, you know, fit in. You're trying to figure out what you're into. How different, if you think back to like you in Missouri getting ready for Fair Week in your like sweatshirt, sweating through it, right? Like, what do you think is different with this generation as they approach trends and they approach just like finding their identity, and what you experience? Like, what's the same and what's different?
The finding the identity thing, I think, sums up why I'm so interested in youth trends. First of all, because you're trying to figure out who you are, what you want to say to the world. You're trying on so many different identities, and I think, and I can speak only from my own experience in rural Missouri, but you didn't really have the freedom to try on too many identities there. You know, I was a cheerleader, and that was who I was. It defined everything, and you really couldn't, like, I remember I was super into fashion, and I wore a pair of pointy toe kitten heels with my jeans a couple of years post this Tommy Hilfiger look, and people said to me, "Why are you so dressed up?" And it made me feel like I wanted to just like walk out of school and never come back.
Yeah.
Like, it was like I was humiliated, because there's nothing worse than being accused of trying too hard.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt in that moment. But, you know, but I looked at these teen magazines, I looked at Elle Girl, and I saw all these heels, and I wanted to try it out. I think TikTok and social media allows people to try on identities almost in the comfort of their own homes, even though they're technically trying on identities in front of the whole world, hypothetically. You're still not doing it in the school. You're not doing it in the hallways, which feels a little bit different, where you can like put something up, and if you regret it and a couple hours later, you can just remove it.
Yeah.
Versus if you make a decision and show up to school with you shaved half your head or something, then you have to really live with that decision, and it could follow you forever.
Right.
Kids, I think, are relentlessly mean, always, and I think maybe social media exacerbates that a tiny bit, but we all went, it's like we all went through that.
Yeah.
So I don't think things are much different. I just think social media exposes people to more and gives them more of a chance to try on different things.
It's like you're reading those magazines growing up, and certainly they are coming from a more cosmopolitan mindset.
Yeah.
I'm interested in how the internet has like removed the physical boundaries of culture for people that like you grew up in a place where like you couldn't go to the local store and necessarily get what was in that magazine, because like it literally just, they weren't buying that, right? And there's no e-com, so there's nothing you can do, right? You would have to like, I went to Italy and I like found these capri pants for, unfortunately. But like I remember people going to New York and they come back with clothes that are like very different than what they could get in Georgia and certainly in Missouri, right? And so the internet has like removed those physical boundaries for people where they have access to culture maybe in a way that they didn't.
Yeah.
I wonder if you think, is the internet algorithms, is it allowing kids to be more expressive, or do you think it is like just a different version of pushing people in the same like kind of boxes, right?
I love technology, and I tend to think, despite downsides, it is overall good. And so I think it allows people to try out more because they're exposed to so much more. And even like, not to make it about myself growing up, but I was limited so much in what I was exposed to, literally to like teen magazines and MTV. And my classmates, we didn't grow up like coming to New York. I there was so little that I was exposed to from like a zoomed out perspective. And so even just having Pinterest for kids where they can search anything and just see any sort of like aesthetic inspiration feels like it has to be good. But I also think, like, to your point about like trend cycles where things used to take a couple of years to reach rural Missouri. So like, maybe the trend would start on the runway, and then maybe the fashion editors would translate it. And then maybe it would reach like the top 10 cities in the stores. And then maybe it would trickle down to like St. Louis was my closest city. But then by the time it actually reached my town, it would be like a good 2 years after like the thing happened. And now there's Shein and all, like you can literally see a trend and buy it on TikTok Shop, and it can be at your house tomorrow, and you can make a TikTok of it. Like the speed with which these things happen now is just, it boggles my mind. An example is my mom is a teacher at my rural school, and she, after the holidays, I spent a lot of time watching Christmas TikTok hauls, which, for those who are unfamiliar, are girls going, I got this, and I got this, and I got this. And I kind of tallied up the most popular, and one of the most popular things was the Lululemon belt, like crossbody belt bag. And when my mom got back to school, she was like, oh my gosh, Casey, all the girls got Lululemon crossbody belt bags in my hometown. Like, that's crazy. There's not a Lululemon close, but there is e-commerce now, and they're exposed to the same things as the girls in New York. And so that just kind of like blew my mind that there's no sort of delay in trends.
Yeah. As I was thinking about this interview and, diving into what you've talked about, one of the things I was interested in is like, what does counterculture look like? Because I do think that like culture is so pervasive and it's spread so quickly. If I think about dyeing my hair or wearing capri pants in Georgia, that was like, I felt very like different.
Yeah.
But like these things now can change so quickly. Everyone's kind of watching the same stuff. They're on social. Like, what does counterculture look like for this generation?
Well, it's really interesting because I've been interviewing a bunch of teens for a story I'm working on. And I just talked to one who had was about to turn 16, and she was sort of not on Snapchat, whereas everyone else is on Snapchat. She instead is spending all of her time on Discord, where she's playing video games. She was bullied on Snapchat. So she's really like just turning away from like what everyone else is doing, and instead has found this sort of community. I wish I remembered exactly what video game she said, but it was,
Yeah.
And so she found her people, and she found a place that speaks to her. But that to me like feels very counterculture in 2024, where she's sort of stepping back from everyone is on Snapchat. If you're a teen or tween, she's not really on TikTok. Instead, she like spending her time on Discord playing this video game. She sounded really happy. And so I think it's the people who, is it the never onliners?
Yeah.
I don't know, but that seems like it's in that direction.
Yeah. Having studied youth culture for so long, and you've now seen like cycles. You have millennials,
Yeah.
Gen Z. You're starting to look at Gen Alpha
Yeah.
more. As marketers, Gen Z has always been important. They're starting to get more purchasing power. They're becoming more and more important. What do you think is like some of the big misunderstandings about that generation, about youth culture?
About Gen Z specifically.
Gen Z specifically, right? Yeah.
Well, when you think about the oldest being 27, the youngest being 14, I think any sweeping generalizations about this generation or any generation, it doesn't, I mean, maybe more so millennials because we're all likely more in the same stage of life now, but a 14-year-old versus a 27-year-old is really hard at this point to look at them and say like, Gen Z is this. So I think that's something that it's hard, it's complicated because brands come to marketers and say, how can I reach or agencies and say, how can I reach Gen Z? And those agencies or experts like have to say, this is how. And so of course you have to make those generalizations. But then, and I do think there's, these micro generations where it's like 18 or maybe it's 14 to 16, you can make generalizations about them. So I think at the end of the day, like it's just too soon to say what Gen Z is like because many of them are still so young.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these headlines that are like Gen Z, you can't trust them in the workplace. It's like many of them are too young to be employed. Like
They're sneaky.
Right, exactly. Or like Gen Z parents are this. And it's like, parents, like, of course there are Gen Z parents, but like so many of Gen Zers that's not their stage of life. So I'm wary of how much the media plays into these generalizations too, because a lot of times putting Gen Z or Gen Alpha into a headline helps them boost their SEO. So that's something that I've like been thinking about a lot as I've been writing Afterschool, is how much does the media sort of play into this trend reporting, even like with TikTok, where it's like, this thing went viral. It's like, did one TikTok go viral?
Right.
Because that is something.
It's something.
But it's, I think when someone who's not on TikTok sees like this crazy thing is going viral on TikTok, you think like everyone on TikTok is doing this crazy thing. But really it could just be like one weirdo on TikTok who's like found themselves on the FYP.
Yeah. I found that like reporters, it's like catnip for them. Like they love to write this shit, and it's like annoying, I think, if you are more in the space, because you're like, I must have done like 10 interviews about de-influencing. And I would always be like, look, I'm happy to talk about this, but this has 80 million views on TikTok.
Yes.
This is nothing.
Yes.
This is absolutely,
It's a
this is
buzzword.
nothing. This is like not a real thing. Some people have made videos about it, but like this has not really gone viral. Like it's a couple videos, and like it's around for a week, but and I do find that like, tying it to influencer, anything that's like even slightly anti-influencer, press really likes to write about.
Under consumption core.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, as a trend, someone who's studied trend and reports on them, like how do you think about nomenclature, or like what you're saying is like what a real trend? Like if you think of like, again, like growing up and you're like, okay, grunge or, whatever these kind of longer multi-year trends. And then it's like, oh, cottage core is trend, or trad white. It's like, well, that's not really like, that's like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like someone, people
Yeah.
are wearing a bow in their hair for like a month. That is not like, we're not going to look back in 15 years and be like, wow, July 3rd to August 15th was this trend.
Yeah.
So like, how do you think about like, and do you have different ways of talking about these micro trends versus the bigger forces that are like, okay, this is a bigger thing?
Yeah, I try to be super sensitive to sort of giving precedent to like, this feels like something bigger that is happening. This is a micro trend. This is just something happening on the internet. And I've actually talked to a couple of data scientists about, is there some sort of system that I can put into place to gauge basically like, how real is this trend? TikTok is tricky because, as you guys know, but you used to be able to see how many views a hashtag had. Now you're only able to see how many videos a hashtag has, which is, I think, less impactful. But then at the end of the day, how impactful is a hashtag on TikTok anyway, when the really cool people aren't using hashtags at all? But I think about like taking a buzzword. So, demure, for example, and like, so if we searched demure on TikTok and saw how many videos had that word in it, that would be one data point. And then looking on Google Trends and seeing, is it spiking on Google Trends, which is difficult because a lot of Gen Zers don't use Google to search at the same rate as other sites, but still, I think it's helpful.
It's us olds being like, what the hell is demure?
Yeah, but that means that millennials or boomers are, have heard this thing and want to know. And then there's also Pinterest also has a similar data site that's similar to TikTok and Google Trends. And then thinking about how many of the sort of like mainstream media sites, so like, has the Internet Culture Reporter at the New York Times covered it? Has WAPO covered it? Has Wall Street Journal covered it? And then for me, like, how I sort of gauge like, this trend is dead. I don't have any grandmas who are alive, but I'm like, if I had a grandma who was still alive and she had heard of this trend, so my sort of like test is like, if it's on the Today Show, it's done.
Yeah.
Like, the Today Show is like, it's dead.
That's it.
And
That's
we
grandma.
need to, yeah, exactly.
It's everyone's grandma is
If my
the Today
grandma
Show.
in rural Missouri could theoretically know of this trend, then it is dead.
Yeah.
And so, like the man in finance thing, which like happened so quickly and then became so annoying so fast. It was covered by the Today Show.
Right. And it's like, yeah, where's the line between meme and trend, right? Because like the internet is such a silly and place, and they get these things that they like to talk about, and part of it is just like joining in on that, right? It's not like necessarily an actual trend.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of when it's dead? Today Show, that's just like, I love that as a like indicator.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of when a trend is picking up where you're like, oh, this is going to have like legs for longer. This is going to be like a half year, full year. This is going to have like multiple cycles of the fashion industry or beauty. Like, this is going to be a bigger thing? Or is that just becoming more rare and like things are just moving so much faster that you're not going to have a like where it's grunge for the next 3 years? You better like it or like whatever.
Yeah, I think the vast majority of these trends last a couple of weeks to a month. And I also think the line between trend and meme is increasingly blurred, because what would you call brat? Is that a meme or a trend? Is it both?
I mean, I mean, what do you think?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
But I also think it's dead.
How is it right? Right. How is it, like, what is the delineation? Like, is it that it is, because I would think a trend is influencing purchasing decisions, right?
Yeah,
like,
a trend has to be somehow
it's
aesthetic.
Commercialized in that way, right? Whereas like it can be a online trend.
Yeah.
This is what our content looks like. This is what we are talking about. This is our like mood.
Yeah.
But is it like, if that green color is like everyone's wearing that, and like, you go into the Gap and it's like all, whatever, green sweatshirts, you might be like, okay, this is like still a thing. How do you?
One example that, something that I sort of thought could be a micro trend, and it appears to continue to have legs, is they were calling it like corporate core or corporate girly, and I'm sure you guys see this in your office where you have Gen Zers working here and they're wearing blazers and like sort of not cosplaying working girl, but because they are working, they very much have jobs, but it's this sort of like business casual turned up a bit. And that started to...
They're like going to Ann Taylor Loft.
Exactly. Well, I always...
Getting a sensible blazer.
I will never forget this moment of going to the West Village so not this past spring, but the spring before, and that first like nice day.
Yes.
And there were 3 like very cool Gen Zers, and they were all wearing like blazers and the trousers.
Yeah.
And it was like their going out outfit. And I just felt like, what the hell has happened? Like, because, otherwise, the first nice day, you would be wearing, like, 10 years ago, like, a little sundress or something. And, like, that was their going out outfit. Like, they wanted to wear, that was, how they're expressing themselves. But then there's also this funny TikTok that I think about a lot where it's the girls who work from home. It's 3 roommates who are working from home. And then they change into their business attire for going out.
Yeah.
And so it's just such an interesting thing where, like, obviously, I don't know if you guys are in the office every day, but
I certainly am.
Many people aren't. And I think there is this desire of, like, we got cheated out of this sort of, like, business casual thing.
Right.
I never want to wear business casual again because I did, I went to the office so much, and it's like, I don't want to do that again. But I totally understand the mindset of people who didn't get to do that, and it's appealing to dress up in that way. So all that to say is like this corporate, I saw that kind of bubble, we all saw it bubble up, not this past spring, but the spring before, and it's still there. And it's taking on different forms, but it's very much still there.
Yeah. And I wonder if part of that is like, even just that line between meme and trend, and is just that like increasingly culture is internet culture. And it used to be, you talked about Tumblr, like it was a fringe weird thing. It was weird to, put stuff online. It was weird to like care about that. And like media was like trying to be like, internet culture we still control culture. Like,
yes.
We are the arbiters of culture. And like, this is a like sideshow. And now it's like, no, this is just culture.
Yes.
Right. And so like, maybe it doesn't matter if brat is a trend or a meme, and the fact is that like memes can just become trends. And like that, they kind of come from seemingly nowhere, which maybe leads me to my next question. How much of these things are like somebody in an office being like, let's try and make this a thing, and how much like are these trends coming from the people versus from like corporations? I mean, Brat's a great example of like, they had a really intentional, like, I'm sure it went better than they could have hoped for. But it was certainly a intentional push to try and like make this a thing, right? But how do you think about that? Like, who's controlling it?
I never think about a corporation being the one behind a trend. Like, I tend to think that corporations try to react to trends, but it seems to me like companies are so much more reactionary now than they were 15 years ago, where companies are less likely to try to create culture and feel like they're in such a state of reactivity, right? Where it's like, at least in the conversations I have with brands, where like the number one question I get is like, how do we think about allocating budget to ensure that we can jump on trends? And I'm like, that is way above my pay grade. Like, I don't know how you, corporation, can think about allocating. Like, you need, I'm sure you guys work with a lot of, but it's like, I think the brands that do it best are the ones who have Gen Zers, very online Gen Zers, not to like age discriminate here. It could be a very online millennial, but someone who's really deeply entrenched with culture and genuinely loves it. It can't be someone who's like tasked to keep up, because that's not going to work.
It's not possible,
But someone who can say like, I have this good idea. If it's, coming from the top where it's, the CMO, no offense to CMOs, but like, it's not going to happen there. They're not going to create a meme or a trend. I'm trying to think of a trend that has been created by a corporation.
Yeah, I think that you're probably right, and like it's probably more that like trends used to come out of, you know, Condé, Hearst, these places
Yes.
owned.
Yeah.
They own the distribution channels, you know, in the same way that movie studios, record labels,
Yeah.
you know, radio, they owned the distribution channels. So they were like, well, we want this artist to be famous. They just couldn't
Yeah.
make them famous.
Yes.
You know, they just
Yes.
they had the means to do that, which they don't
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Which is why they have to be so reactionary, because
Yeah.
the like distribution channels have been democratized to a place where, you know, I think that's like such a, I used to always think about how, you know, Vogue's like blindness to non-white skinny people in so many ways created the influencer space. Like,
Yeah.
you know, people, especially early YouTubers, would be like, well, there was no one that looked like me.
Yeah.
Like the early beauty influencers would be like, Vogue would never say how to do a cat eye if you had an eye shape like mine. It was always a white girl. They didn't do makeup tutorials for dark-skinned people. And so they filled this gap because like corporations had this like point of view,
Yeah.
and they weren't willing to go outside
Yeah.
of it. And
It
then
was
like
off-brand
Yeah,
for
the internet
them.
like
Yeah.
filled it. Oh, I mean the off-brand thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like working with luxury houses early on, you know, they really only wanted to work with skinny white girls, and you'd like suggest someone else, and they'd be like, that feels off brand. It's like, that feels racist, what you're saying. Like
Yeah.
that's and
Yeah.
like and not and like naive.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
that like you think that you can still just like control this image and be like, this is what a cool girl is. This is what a like take brand name girl
Yeah.
is. And like it was all the same. And so like the internet kind of filled this. But where the hell were we going with this? What was I talking about?
I would also say that I think to the extent that the corporation would do it, it would be through commercials like What's Up or the Budweiser.
Yeah, but can you think of anything recently?
Not anything recent.
Okay.
They wouldn't have.
Because they've lost the,
Yeah, unless Taylor Swift is a corporation,
I mean, for sure.
which she is.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of anxiety amongst older, I'm saying older in this like me, okay? I just turned 40. And I think as like marketers get older, they have increased anxiety of like, I need to understand youth culture. I don't
Yeah.
understand it. Like I need to, how important is that? Like if you work for a brand that isn't explicitly marketing to
Yeah,
Gen Z.
yeah.
Because I do think there is like this obsession with understanding it.
Yes.
Why is it really important? And are there situations where you think like, even in the people that you talk to, agencies or brands that come to you, where you're like, this is not as like, you don't have to worry so
Yeah.
much about this.
It's funny that you say this because I just got someone meant to forward it to a colleague, but instead the response came to me on my newsletter, and she was like,
always so embarrassing.
it was like a marketing
Yeah.
firm in like Milwaukee or
Yeah.
something. And I don't mean that disparaging to Milwaukee.
We love Milwaukee. Yeah.
But she was like,
Shout out to Milwaukee.
she was like, I know we don't have clients who are targeting Gen Z, but I think it's really important that we keep up on what young people are doing. And so then I went to the website to see what kind of clients they had. And it was like healthcare,
Yeah.
insurance, like, because I was just so curious,
Yeah.
like, who are their clients? And so then I was thinking like deeply about this, like, you know, like geriatric healthcare, like they don't really need to think
Yeah.
about Gen Z. However, Gen Zers' parents are going to be in nursing homes in so many years.
Yeah.
And I do think that it is beneficial for any brand who has a public facing presence to understand what's going on with not youth culture, but culture generally, especially internet culture, if they're planning to put, have a presence there, because there could be something going on the internet and you have no idea, and then you post something and it comes off very tone deaf. You just really have to have a certain plugged inness.
Yeah.
But in my last full-time job, I was content and comms at a VC, and I have to say, going into that job, I felt like everyone needs to have a social presence. Everyone needs to be thinking about what Gen Z is doing. And then in that job, working with, like, for instance, like space startups or there was like some carbon environmental stuff.
Yeah.
Super smart people, and then it's like, you guys do not need to be thinking, like, do not waste your time thinking about this, because you are largely, I mean, for one thing, B2B, and you're also, it's like there. So I will say I went in very like narrow-minded of like, everyone should care about what Gen Z is doing, and that's because I care deeply. But then it's like, no, that's actually not true.
Yeah.
So I think it goes both ways. If you're B2B, you probably, and you genuinely don't care about like keeping up with what's going on in your own personal life. Something I think about a lot is like my dad, who is the loveliest man ever, but I just always recall like having like MTV VMAs on and him being like, I don't know a single one of these. He's not that old, but he like took pride in like not knowing who any of those people are. Like kids these days, I get it, but like I also like I don't listen to what kids these days are listening to, but I do want to understand how they're reaching young people, what is their music, like how like, is it Chappell Rowan? Chapel? Is it Chapel?
Chapel. Yeah. You're talking to a Chapel stan, so
wait, that's
Midwest princess.
yeah.
She's from Missouri. I should know this.
You should.
My mom, this is a side, I'm sure you'll cut this, but my mom from rural Missouri was visiting me last week. We went to 2 bars in Greenpoint. Both of them had Pink Pony cocktails on the menu.
Crazy.
And my mom and I, both being Missouri girls, were like, we should really listen to her.
Yeah.
But
should. She's amazing.
We should know how to say her name.
I mean, look, if this is a safe space, like I know Doja Cat exists as a concept, right? But I'm definitely like, if you put a gun to my head and you were like, name a Doja Cat song, I'd be like, yeah, just like pull the fucking trigger, because there's like, there's no way I know. I know this person exists.
Yeah.
Which I feel like there's a lot of that. Like,
yes.
I know of their existence. I'm glad there's like less littles happening in the world.
Lils,
like,
yeah.
There was like a big little thing for a while there, and I couldn't keep up with it. Anyway.
I strictly listen to hip hop, which you wouldn't expect probably, but so that's why I like don't like when it comes to like I'm like I'm not gonna listen to it. Sometimes it comes up on TikToks, and I'm like, oh, this is fun, but like I'm never gonna seek it out.
Yes. What about for influencers? Same kind of question. Like you've been around for long enough, you've seen like, okay, the people, I was there early, we came up in this photo caption world, started with Tumblr, onto Instagram, well, blogs first probably, and now you've got like all of these people who have made their career on this, who I see struggling with the new world, and a lot of them are like, TikToks are not for me, I'm not even fucking with that, but like, they still do have to make a few reels a week. They have to like transition to video. They're trying to do trends. Like, how do you think about influencers who are, it's harder for them because brands can just like go young. This is not new. They've always just like gone to youth culture, and like brands can reinvent themselves over and over again. And the people that work on them can stay old and they can seem young.
Yeah.
But what about influencers who are like navigating this world?
I think it would be so tricky to be like an influencer who came up sort of 10 years ago, say, or 5 years ago even, where it was like, if you're beautiful and you have nice clothes and a good photographer, like you can have theoretically a really successful Instagram, Pinterest, fashion blog. You can make a killing on that, and that's fine. You don't have to display personality. Right. You surely have but you don't have to put yourself out there like that.
Surely.
I wasn't gonna say it. But so one of my best friends works in celebrity PR, and I think about it with celebrities a lot, where it's like they are beautiful people who act. They don't necessarily feel comfortable displaying their personality,
they're terrible
humor.
Influencers.
They're terrible influencers.
But sponsored content is always
it's so bad.
Awful.
But they lack a lot of like humor, and I think often and humor is so much what resonates on platforms these days, TikTok especially. I think about Harry Styles a lot, who generally, but also he was huge into Twitter back in the day. He was hilarious. He was like constantly tweeting funny stuff, And then at some point, I think the stakes became too high, and it's like, why put myself,
Right.
literally why? There's, there's always going to be backlash to
Yeah.
something. There's going to be headlines, like, I'm not going to do that. And so I think celebrities sort of distance themselves from Twitter and then realize, like, on Instagram, we can just put up a beautiful photo. But then TikTok came along, and it's like, no, we actually want to see the weird side of you, and you need to be, like, candid and funny. And a lot of, I think influencers and celebrities alike, like, can't be candid and funny.
Yeah.
And I think for brands, they can find someone who can do
can do
that
that.
for them. So I think it's really tricky. I mean, I think if I were a beautiful influencer who wasn't very humorous and didn't have a lot of personality that I wanted to display, I would avoid TikTok.
Yeah.
I would just stick with what I know, because I think it's so hard to make that leap in a way that feels not
Yeah.
cringe.
It's funny, Callie, who's right there, we started working together initially because I was like, I want to participate in TikTok a little more. I
Yeah.
want to just try it. Like,
Yeah.
I just, like,
Are you a TikToker?
No.
Okay.
no. But you worked at TikTok.
Yeah.
You love
Okay.
TikTok.
Okay.
Like, and before we hired her, she was managing people's, like, brands and stuff, TikTok. And so
Okay.
I was like, I want to do this. And, like, I think it's hard to fully understand a platform unless you engage in it and
Yes.
create on it.
I couldn't agree more.
And, it didn't work. And it's not it's not Callie's fault. I wasn't comfortable making a fool of myself. Like, I don't have a sense of humor about myself in that, like, I can, like, be the butt of the joke or put myself into, like, a, uncomfortable. I had a hard time putting myself into, like, uncomfortable
You have a
situations.
great sense of humor.
I mean,
I think
thank
you
you.
just. I think you need to do it more.
Right,
I really
maybe.
do think so. I keep going,
But it's also like it's I've got the 100 employees.
Yes, yes.
I've got the
Yeah.
clients. It's like,
Yeah.
I would post something and somebody who worked at the company would be like, and this is actually not on TikTok, but generally, like, they'd be like, ooh, I don't know, like, maybe you should take that down. And, you get to a place where you're like, once you start doing that, you do lose the magic, and, like, I remember having this friend who's the OG Oscar PR girl.
Oh yes.
Remember?
Is it Erica?
Erica.
Yes.
And Erica's not going to watch this, so I feel like I can tell this story. But, she was talking about wealth and was like, you get to a certain point, you have so much money, you can't talk about it online anymore.
Yeah.
You can't talk about your life.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's a liability.
Yeah.
It's so unrelatable.
Yes.
Like, you just kind of have to, retire from the internet.
Yeah.
Which is maybe partially a dream of
Yeah.
mine, of, like, getting to a place where you feel like I don't have to engage with this. But I
Yeah.
do find it much harder now
Yeah.
to, like, go out and be myself. In the way that Tumblr, I was, like, so unencumbered. I could just, like, say anything because, like, who cared? Nobody. The stakes were so low. you know?
Yeah, I mean, two thoughts here. I've seen recently, I'm sure you guys have too, where I don't mean to address the audience like this. I
please
bet
do.
you guys would. Where these
It's a live
these very once relatable influencers do suddenly become so successful that, like, Haley Kate buying the Hamptons house, where it's like, or I think
Emma Chamberlain.
Alex Earl is a great example too, where it's
Alex.
like she was always rich, but, like, she had a pretty relatable life, and now it's like she's on private jets, like. And I think that aspirational content, especially with people that you sort of grew up with feeling like they were peers,
Yeah.
or even just, like, a tiny bit aspiration, then they become so aspirational that it's like, I do not relate to you whatsoever. Like,
Yeah.
I am just watching you go on influencer trips and, like, frolic in the Hamptons. Like, why am I here?
Yeah.
It's really hard. Like,
hard.
what is and I think even with fashion influencers are a little less interesting to me just because I'm not really a fashion girl, but where it's like these fashion influencers start out thinking about price and inclusivity, and then suddenly they're
Here's how to put a look together for
Yes.
this is
yeah.
a $100 outfit. It looks like a $5,000 outfit.
Right, but then suddenly they're wearing the $5,000 outfit, and it's like
Or the
it's
$20,000
so hard
outfit.
to maintain that sort of that direct
Yes.
contact with it. But at the same time, I will say I have this belief that everyone should have comfort with a front-facing camera and talking and figure out how to navigate that. How I got this belief was at my last job, I worked for Alexis Ohanian, who Reddit founder, and his comfort, he is, I think, an elder millennial. His comfort in front of a front-facing camera was astounding to me. Like, we would send him just quick, like, record something about this. And he would just, like, he lives in Florida, and he'd just go into his lawn in Florida and just, like, riff, and it would be gold. Or, you know, it would be good. And his comfort, his lack of self-questioning with that, I was like, if he can do this, and the stakes are much higher for him, I can get over this. And so I spent about like 6 months in earnest, like trying to record TikToks, so many of which I never posted or like pretty much immediately deleted. But a couple went viral, and then I kept at it. And now I won't say that I feel totally comfortable, but I don't like obsess over it. And I'm not like, oh my gosh, did I, you know, it's also the editing tools on TikTok are so good that like if you say too many times, you can just so easily delete that stuff. So I do think people should like, if you know.
A billionaire can do it, we all can,
exactly.
right? I mean, come on.
But I will say, if you have 100 employees, then it's like, is it worth the time investment for you given how much other stuff you have to do?
Well, it's
Depends
a good way
on your
to
business
avoid,
goals.
it's a good way to avoid doing those things.
Exactly,
you know?
exactly.
Going back to the children, what are they looking for out of influencers? Because, again, when I came up, you know, one, that the word didn't exist. Initially, it was like, you know, so many of my close early friends I met on the internet, like Tumblr, like if you had a Tumblr and you were coming to New York, I would just be like, you can stay in my apartment, you know, like it felt like such a small community that was like, you know, and then Instagram comes around, you follow your 500 people and you just like don't add anyone else. And you just like really feel like every day you wake up and you're like, who went out last night? Who's going on a trip? Who's whatever? But like you're checking in with your friends. What are like that relationship seems to be changing. What do you think Gen Z, Gen Alpha, what are they looking for influencers? Who do they find influential?
Influencer specific or?
Influencer, like, or just like when they open these apps, like how do they care about an influencer? Or they just want like content.
I mean, I think there's a reason why Taylor Swift and, you know, to a lesser extent these days, Emma Chamberlain, but Alex Earle, like all of these girls have such massive fan bases because they really do have a candid quality with their followers. They make their followers feel as though, you know, you'll see the comments so often on their TikToks where it's like, I feel like I'm getting a FaceTime from you. Like that's what young people want, is to feel like they are sort of no holds bar, like just like confessions and confiding. And I think that's why so many of these celebrities or older influencers have a hard time, is that's just not the relationship that they have. So it's really hard to like give that much of themselves. And I think with Emma Chamberlain, we've seen her sort of struggle with like, how much do I want to give to my, you know, she came up so young and so candid. And that's okay when you're like coming of age and but then once you become that big, then it's really hard to divulge so much about your life and still feel safe.
It's like, guys, I'm like struggling to know what tax strategy I should pursue to like hide my extra money, you know, like that's just like nobody cares. Right?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because recently, I'm sorry that I know this, but Alex Earle like installed a new toilet in her Hamptons home, and it was like super expensive toilet. And do you know this? And all of the comments were like really hard to take, a millionaire like freaking out over a many $1,000 toilet, you know, like just the disconnect there where it's like how much, and this kind of goes back to your previous question of like, she was trying to be candid and like, oh shucks, like
my $10,000 toilet broke.
And so I think it's just one of those things where people are constantly trying to navigate how to continue that candidness. I think Selena Gomez, the way that she has that connection with her followers and is as famous as she is, and like I'm always looking at her Rare Beauty TikTok because she manages to seem extremely candid best friend or like even big sister without giving too much of her personal life away. She she's been doing it literally since she was a kid, so I think that's why she's able to do it so well. But it's
she's
like
quite guarded.
She's guarded, but
then
I
it
don't think her
feels-
followers feel that from
Right.
her. They feel like she's confiding in her skin troubles or her, whatever.
She doesn't even have a phone, right?
Yeah,
She
yeah.
doesn't post herself.
But they
she sends
respect.
it to someone.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's one of those things where I think people are just having to like constantly navigate this, and it's really hard to strike a balance between acting candid versus like being candid.
Yeah. Obviously, you talked about marketers being able to jump on trends and move quickly and be reactive, that being important. But like, Nike's been in the news, right?
Yeah.
They've been struggling. Like, what, as you think of these companies that are like, have been so dominant and so good in old kind of marketing.
Yeah.
Like Nike's the best example because I think they are so good at telling their story.
Yeah.
But if the future of marketing is someone else telling your story, and that's something that they're very uncomfortable with,
Yeah.
how do like companies like this navigate that change, and what should like marketers who are listening to this be thinking about? Is there something that they can do like tomorrow? I guess that I always ask these two-part questions, and it's dumb because I shouldn't, but I guess my two-part question is bigger brands multi-year, like as you look at like staying relevant. I know you talked to like Lauren Sherman about Gap.
Yeah.
What can you do to like transform the company long term? And then a marketer inside of these places, what can they do like tomorrow to be better at their jobs and in speaking to youth culture?
I think there's a reason that these startups and more nimble DTC, VC-backed companies, not all of them, but some of them, are able to connect with their fans or audience in a way that the Nikes aren't, and it's that they are just more nimble. But these younger brands are able to be more nimble, and that is very reflected in their social media, and then you see people responding to that. And I think there's something about, the Glossiers of the world even, which Glossier is now a very big company, but if I tag them, if I get a new Glossier mascara and I tag them, they're going to respond to that, they're going to DM me. And it just feels like they have more of a direct line. They understand customer experience, I think, in a way that Nike doesn't, or these larger brands don't, because they have such an antiquated mindset around things like interacting with their customers. I also worry about, I've done some consulting with a couple of, I'll tell you exactly which ones offline, but like when you learn how bloated their sort of marketing orgs are, and where they don't even just have one marketing org, they have so many different marketing departments, and it's like, how do you guys, if you see a perfect TikTok that you guys should react to, and it's so brilliant, or like even if, someone does something funny about Nike shoes, and if Nike sent them a pair of shoes, it'd be such a fucking win. But like, there's so much red tape, and so much, it's so bloated, these organizations, that they can't respond, versus if it's a smaller brand, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like, what is a small shoe brand? Hoka, then they can they can vary on running. They can immediately dispatch something and respond, and they're also in the comments responding. Like that just makes such a difference. And I would also say, like, to be responding to your fans in the comments is one thing. Something I hate is when corporations, Clorox, or like are in comments on viral TikToks. Just comment, like making comments. It's like, this is not a strategy. That is just like an aside.
That's
rant.
an aside. Yes, I agree. Like the whole like unhinged. We're gonna be.
Yes,
this
that
brand
is
is
not.
This brand is actually like a bitchy teenager is like not.
Yes.
It's like you're Clorox. You bleach things. Like,
to answer your question though, I think you really have to figure out how to structure your team to be more nimble, or allow your agency to do that for you, because otherwise you're never going to be able to engage with culture in the way that basically the consumer expects you to. And I think in terms of like short-term thinking, it is empowering the younger people on your team to come up with ideas. I also tend to think in my conversations with Gen Zers about brands and social, the thing that like comes up again and again is they like when they they tend to not follow big brands on social because it is just not interesting or inspiring content. It is so advertising-y that they just don't bother to even follow, versus the smaller brands that feel like there's more personality, maybe there's an actual person that they can feel sort of invested in. That makes them follow and more compelled to support the brand.
Do you think we'll can ever is part of this that like as the world niches down, that like we just could never have another Nike, we could never have another that like we can't build these enormous category generations like bridging, even thinking of like Zara versus Shein, right? Like there is no, I mean, I can't think of a 35-year-old woman that would like fire up Shein and be like, I'm going to order some, some stuff from this website.
You'd be surprised.
I mean, maybe, but like, it doesn't feel as generation like spanning as Zara does, which like you can still just like go get a basic there and it's like, acceptable. But is it just that like we're not in the same way that I don't think we will have another Taylor Swift or Beyonce, because like monoculture kind of collapses, that like we're just not going to have these big brands anymore?
I don't know. I mean, think about Glossier, for instance, like, and not to, not that they're the pinnacle of growth, but to see how they've thought about, they have a location in Williamsburg. If you go by on a weekend, there's a line, it's not even the main flagship. Right. Or Brandy Melville, another example, always lines at all of their locations. They don't have the scale of even a Glossier, but they've really figured out brand. I mean, I think it's hard to say in terms of like, Zara to me doesn't feel that scaled. How scaled are they?
Huge.
Are they?
Yeah. I know. I mean, like Nike's 80 billion.
Yeah.
So like, okay.
Yeah.
That's enormous.
Yeah.
And it's like Glossier, big, but probably doing 250 million a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Versus like Estee Lauder, which is doing like 15 billion.
Yeah.
It's like, can we build
another Estee Lauder?
Right. Can you build another Estee Lauder? Can you build, these brands that like could appeal to such broad, I think that like everyone is niching down. Yeah. That like it's so hard to appeal like really broadly unless you're a retailer that's got like, if you're a Fohr and you've got like all of these brands.
Yeah.
But like it feels really difficult to like build a brand of that size anymore, in the same way that like after Taylor Swift and Beyonce, like there is no like enormous superstar like that, right? Chapel's having her moment, Charlie's having a moment, but they're not, in 10 years, they're just not going to be Taylor Swift. I can feel like pretty confident in saying that, right?
Yeah.
And is that just because like there is no longer the like corporate media machine behind these? Because like I was thinking about like in the Super Bowl that like 20 years ago, Britney, Beyonce, all these young kids played at the Super Bowl, and like even older people, they did know who Britney was because you'd walk by the magazine stand and you'd see her on there. Like you couldn't avoid it.
Pepsi commercials.
Pepsi commercials, all these things, right? You couldn't avoid it, but now you can, right? There can be whole. People send me people all the time like, you heard of this person? It's like 40 million followers. Like, no, I've never heard of this person.
Yeah.
Like, how does that happen?
Yeah.
You have 40 million followers and I've never heard of you. And I spend my life on the internet, But it is interesting to think, are we going to get the big, even movie stars, right? Like, it just feels like everything is getting like smaller and more specific.
Yeah.
Like, are you going to have another Tom Cruise? Like, probably not.
Hopefully
it's not going to be Glenn.
Yeah, it's not going to be Glenn.
I won't hear any.
Let's be honest, it's not going to be Glenn.
It's not going to be Glenn. Let's
be
totally honest. It's definitely not going to be Glenn. It's not. He's got no chance. No.
No, that's super interesting because, in our previous, what we were talking about, where it's like the Glossiers of the world are excelling in customer service, in excelling in current day brand building and social media and having this dialogue with our customers. Nike is so big, they're too big to have that same dialogue with our customers, but that is hurting them. So it's like, are we never going to have another brand that big because consumers expect more from brands these days, and it's just impossible to scale.
And it's even like what you were saying with celebrities being bad at social. It's like, if you get to that size, if Glossier is doing $5 billion a year, are they in your DMs anymore?
Right.
You know, are
Right.
they doing these things anymore? Do they feel like, you know what, we don't have
can't.
we can't
Yeah.
scale it, or it's not serving us, or there's
Yeah.
there's risks now to doing this that we don't feel like we can.
Yeah.
Or people are like, get out of my DMs. I don't want
I
you
don't wanna
here. You're
talk
like
to
a
a
big,
brand.
you're
Yeah.
like this huge brand, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for them to get that big would take another 15 years, and then by that time, are they like old fogies? It's like an interesting.
We'll have to revisit this in 15 years
Let's
and
do
see.
it. Yeah, hopefully on my yacht.
Yes. Yes.
Or yours. Honestly, either one I'll take.
In Fort Lauderdale.
Either one, yeah. What would be your dream brand to like get in there and like revitalize, and like they hand you the reins and they're like, do whatever you got to do?
Gap.
Gap.
Truly, I love Gap so much. I can keep this answer short. If
Don't
to wrap
have
up.
to.
I have loved Gap my entire life. You know, grew up small town,
Yeah.
but we would go to the St. Louis Mall and go to Gap Kids. And I just remember like a floral Gap jumper. It was a little mini. I loved it so much. Gap denim at that point was such good quality. And like even at that point where I must have been like 8.
Yeah.
I could tell it was nice.
You're like,
You
look
know,
at
I
these-
could tell it was
look at
nice
these
quality.
seam- look at the seam work.
This is 100% cotton. I
Yeah.
could definitely tell. But so, and then grew up like wearing and loving Gap. And then when I went to University of Missouri and I worked at the Gap at the Columbia Mall and loved it. I loved
Yeah.
working retail because I like loved talking
Right.
to people. And it was great to have that discount and just have always had such an affinity for Gap. And it's not quite there, but they're doing a lot better than they were last
Yes.
summer.
Yeah. And I loved your conversation. If y'all haven't heard her, you and Lauren had a great conversation about this on the Puck podcast at Gap versus Abercrombie, and how they're approaching social and
Yeah.
marketing. And I thought that was like such a interesting conversation, and I love that, and I hope that, you know, they should call you.
They really do still need to improve their styling,
Yes.
like that in their merchandising and their store. I don't know if you've been into a Gap.
I can't say that I have
And
recently.
you know what's interesting, just even
Where
in
would
New
I even
York.
find one?
Well, I mean, there used to be so many,
Yeah.
and now it's like
Is
the
there one?
Astor Place one is gone. There was one in Fidei, and it's now Gap Factory,
Okay.
which I find upsetting.
Right.
There is still one on Fifth Avenue, and maybe somewhere else.
Upper West Side.
Upper West,
Oh.
but maybe Times Square too.
Yeah, you can
Okay.
Yeah.
When you're not on the internet, what do you do?
I
You
love
s-
to run.
Yeah.
I love to walk my dogs. I like to be outside.
I did hear recently you're doing 15,000 steps a day.
Well, with this new puppy.
Yeah.
So I listen to a lot of podcasts. I love taking the ferry. I love going to the beach. So when I'm not in front of my computer, I'm probably outside.
Okay, I love it. That's great.
Actually, someone emailed and was like, I'm worried about your mental health. Do you get exercise? Do you get outside? And it was like a mom who subscribed, and she wasn't being funny. She meant it like earnestly.
She really, yeah.
I was like, I promise I'm
You know, nobody has ever reached out about my mental health. That nobody worries about me. So I think that's great that you're engendering that kind of care and,
Yeah.
and concern. Who are your favorite follows right now?
Oh, this is so hard. Let's see. So I spend the vast majority of my time on TikTok, but by nature of TikTok, you're more scrolling, right?
Yeah.
So I find this to be a really hard question because who am I seeing on TikTok that isn't just entering my feed? I would say
And how much following are you doing on TikTok?
a lot of
Yeah.
following. Yeah. In fact, I saw a TikTok that was like making fun of ratios of like followers to followings,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, I'm on here for research. So, gosh, I mean, I really don't know if I can tell you who I'm regular. I look at Leo Pizza a lot because
Uh-huh.
they have specials that I like to see. It's my
Yeah.
favorite pizza place.
Great.
And
Shout out Leo
yeah,
Pizza. Where is that?
in
I've never-
Williamsburg. It's the
Okay,
best.
I've never heard of it.
Had my wedding party there. That's how
Oh,
much I love it.
amazing.
I'm trying to think. Wow, this is a surprisingly hard question for me.
Well, actually, I think it is really interesting because for individual influencers, the like existential threat is the algorithm.
Yeah.
You know, that it like de-emphasizes the individual so much.
Yeah.
And is more focused on the specific content that like and I've seen it is very difficult for TikTokers to build a
Yeah.
long career. You know, like
Yeah.
Instagram influencers have been able to like build 15-year careers, you know, from blogs to
Yeah.
Instagram. They, you know, may not be getting as much engagement now, but they're still able to pull in good money. They bought houses. They've like done this. And if you
Yeah.
don't, if you don't get into the millions really quickly, I feel like sometimes the algorithm can leave these people behind, and then you look and they've got 400,000 followers, they're getting 2,000 views on a video, and you're like, there's no way to make money off of this.
Yeah.
It's like sad.
Here's a funny anecdote from literally yesterday. I was walking my dog on my block, and I saw one of my favorite TikTokers. And then I realized in that moment, I don't even know her name. So I couldn't even say, like, I think her name's Yvette.
Oh, love her.
Do you know her? She has curly hair?
hair.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she was on my block, but then I like looked at my husband stupidly, and I was like, she's on TikTok. And he's like, okay. But like, she was like, but I did not know her name for the life of me, and I couldn't tell you her handle or anything, but I love her content. But it's like one of those things where I don't know if it's bad for influencers, but it also seems good for, like, in terms of like parasocial relationships, because I don't feel like I actually know her. And so there, I feel like there is a distance there, because I'm like, I don't even know your name.
Yeah. You've been studying youth culture for so long. You've seen it change across multiple generations. Like, where do you think it's all like, is it the same thing in a different distribution method, or is it like, does this like fundamentally change, what it means to be a kid? And like, do you think about 10 or 15 years from now, do you have like any, and the answer is okay if it's no, because like you may not, like, do you have any predictions or things that you feel like, as I think 10 or 20 years from now, like, I worry about this, or I think this is kind of where the world is going to go?
10 to 20 years is hard, because like 20 years ago, literally Facebook, maybe?
No.
Not even.
No, Facebook, yes.
Okay.
Facebook, MySpace, blog, some like early like live journal blogs.
Yeah. So I think platforms have changed, and the format, so Tumblr, Twitter, now TikTok, short form video, the format has changed, the mode has changed, but I don't think that it has changed kids' lives. I've talked to a bunch of alphas for different stories, and a lot Gen Alpha, and
I was like, are you like DMing Andrew Tate?
Sorry, Gen Alpha. But a lot of them aren't on TikTok. A lot of them have a healthy distance from social media in a way that I feel like we probably did from entertainment, or I don't think it's like, I don't think it's doom and gloom, but it is very hard to think about 10 years, because like, what platforms will exist then? TikTok is sort of a mutated form of YouTube. Yeah. Which you could kind of draw back to, I guess, MySpace or previous platforms, Vine. But I think, we're going to continue to see some acceleration towards different platforms, but I don't think it's doom and gloom for young people or society. But again, I love technology, so maybe I'm not the right person to ask.
I think you talked in your newsletter today or yesterday about politics and about the vibe. The vibe right now is encouraging, but it could it could shift, right?
Yeah.
Like I saw that, after the assassination attempt in that photo, I was like, we lost.
Yeah.
Like, it's done,
100%.
right? Like, this is fucking over. And now, a month later, it's like totally different, right? And who knows where it will be in a month from now. But do we all become like, what is it, NPC? Like, are we going to be like live streaming our whole, like 20 years from now, is everyone going to just be like wearing a device that live streams their whole life in that? Or is there going to be like a rejection of that, and we'll like build some more barriers around like what is because it doesn't feel like, actually TikTok, it feels like steps back from the personal a little bit. Like I think like, even though some of the content is very raw, especially I feel like when stories first came out, it was like you're doing 15 stories, your whole day is being documented, and then you've got the posts, and now TikTok feels like in some ways it's stepped back from that, and it's more like skit and comedy, and it's sometimes less like, this is just me, here's my breakfast, and here's my this, and here's my daughter, and here's that, so I think that'll be like a central question, like does the trend continue, and like the lines between real life and online life blur? They're already pretty indistinguishable, but like, does online life become dominant? There's a argument to say it already is. The dominant form of your identity is your online identity for people. That's like an interesting, like if that continues and like your IRL life is like less important to you.
Yeah, I think in conversations I've had with Gen Zers, it seems like there is an awareness around, apps, IRL screens. We know that they are not good for us. They are sort of a necessary evil. I think I've also had a couple of conversations in the last week or two of Gen Zers talking about taking screen breaks, which I thought was really interesting. Only a couple of conversations, so this isn't like a widespread trend, but I do think it's an interesting sentiment of like understanding IRL does not equal,
Right.
But I also think when TikTok first started to take hold around COVID times, I remember we used to live above a restaurant, and I saw someone set up a tripod and was like recording, like just creating content. And I was watching from the apartment like, oh my God. And this was before I was even I just spent no time on TikTok.
Yeah.
I was very much like, I don't want to look at TikTok.
Yeah.
I think it's shit. Like, I don't care about what's happening on that platform. And which,
where's she?
But I remember thinking like TikTok is gonna like everyone's just gonna be creating content at everywhere, and it's gonna ruin everything. And then you realize like people are gonna do that no matter what the platforms are, but it's few and far between. It's like people want to document beautiful sunsets and cool adventures, but it's not like we are, well, I don't live in the Lower East Side, so maybe it's different there, but it's not like people are rolling up, and setting up a full, and it's not like...
It's not like the guy outside of Prada every day in his little, like, whatever, doing his thing,
Yeah,
Which, like...
people still want to live their lives, and I think that people, from, like, research that I've done on Gen Z and also just reading a lot on it, people want authentic connections, and I think there's an awareness of, like, putting a camera in your face does not help an authentic connection. Although I feel like we're having a perfectly authentic connection, but
helps.
generally, but so no, I don't think it's going to be doom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear. With the Substack and your promotion of it, I know you'll bring it to TikTok sometimes and you'll talk about an edition, not on Instagram. Is that a bandwidth decision? Is that a intentional decision? How do you think about promoting the Substack?
It's not intentional. I think Instagram is this is actually a really interesting question. So with this podcast, we will be recording. I'm doing video recording as well, but it won't be uploaded entirely via video, which I believe you guys do. I do think that is the best way to do it, but it's so hard, especially when you're doing it virtually. But we are doing social cuts.
Yep.
And so I did today post a reel, my second reel ever, and it was of the, from the podcast. So I'm interested. I think TikTok for me has just, I get a lot more out of it professionally in terms of research, and I find it more fun. Instagram for me, it has been a platform because I've been on it for so long, since like 2009, I want to say 2010. It is a lot of like high school friends, college friends, and so I have had a hard time figuring out like how do I show up here? And
You've got some follower baggage.
Yeah. And I don't want to overthink it because it's not like they give a shit, but it's like I don't share a lot about my personal life because I don't have an interesting personal life. It's like I have 2 dogs and a husband, it's like I'm not going on. There's nothing to share day to day. And so then it's like, well, how much am I sharing professionally to this audience that's mostly personal, but it's not a big audience. So I've also had a couple of brands reach out and say, we'd be interested in sponsoring the newsletter, and you also doing some stuff on social, and then me sort of like thinking through like, well, what does that look like on Instagram? Because, so TBD, I would say, I think Instagram isn't going anywhere, and I think with TikTok being, somewhat controversial and who knows what will happen with it, Instagram is a smart place to invest time. So it's something that I'm going to experiment with. And I do like Instagram stories because it feels lower stakes. I see a lot of TikToks about the pressure to post on feed in Instagram. Those really resonate with me because at this point I'm like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
So follow me on Instagram and I'll
Encourage.
post more.
Yeah, we're all going to encourage you. We're going to send you DMs being like, you can do it. Just post something. I feel you too, though. It's hard.
Yeah, it's just one of those platforms where I'm like, it's yeah.
And I think the
It's like Facebook a little bit for me, where I'm like, I don't know.
Like 12 years and being like, there's people that follow me for, all these different parts of my life. And so I'm never giving people exactly what they want.
Yeah.
Which is what's nice about the algorithm. It'll just like point it towards an audience that would be interested in what you're talking about.
Yes, 100%.
So we'll let algorithms just control our entire lives.
Yes.
Great.
I'm good with it.
Obviously, everyone should subscribe.
Yes.
Not to the free version.
Yeah.
Everyone should pay you.
Yeah.
Pay. You can also just throw your Venmo up if you just like are interested in just sending you any money. But Afterschool is essential reading for any marketer. You're also on TikTok.
Yes.
Less on Instagram.
Not very much on Instagram, although as of today I have my own podcast.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That's why I wanted this Negroni, because it was a long morning.
Okay.
The upload stuff.
Oh,
it was
I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But I hear it's a thing.
Yes.
Well, where can they find you? What's the podcast called?
So it's called Afterschool.
Great.
Yeah, it's just a companion podcast. On the first episode, I have a Stanford student and content creator. We talk about back to school hauls and a marketing badass from Pinterest.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Well, look up the podcast, subscribe to the Substack.
Yes.
Follow you on TikTok.
Yes.
If you want extra credit, you could check out Instagram. There's not going to be as much happening there. And if you work at Gap Inc.,
yes, call me.
Email. Yeah, available for consulting. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I'm gonna have to send you after this. There's this place that I've been buying wine. It's like an daily email.
Oh.
And they send they always have interesting bottles. They're usually selling stuff they're gonna get in a year. And you just email back I'll take 2 bottles. And then they keep it in storage in California until you hit a case.
Okay.
And then ship it to you. It's a dangerous way to buy wine because you're not checking out anywhere.
Right.
You just email you I'll take that.
Yeah,
that
you're
sounds
sure,
good.
throw it into the.
They got your card on file, and then so I don't have as bad a problem as my brother. Who I just asked him. I was like, how many bottles do you have sitting there in storage because they don't ship it during the summer?
Oh.
He's like, I have 185 there, and 100 more that are pending arrival.
Why
Damn.
ship it during the summer?
Because it's it is too hot. So they need to wait till the temperature drops because, if it's, you got $1,000 of wine sitting in the back of a UPS truck for 2 days in the boiling sun, it's not good. Anyway, this is going to be a wine podcast today.
Yeah.